matters. All right, what's up, guys? We are back on live today, trying to hit one up real quick before everybody heads out to lunch. We're in my office, and as usual, we have our social media manager here, Emma. So she's going to ask some questions today. Really, the last couple times we've really been talking through questions that parents might ask, questions that athletes might ask, certain challenges that they're dealing with on a day-to-day basis. And then the most recent Facebook Live I got on last week, I talked a little bit more about what I do, what it looks like, that kind of thing. And so this week we're really focusing on the performance anxiety piece of it, because a lot of the athletes that I sit down with, whether it's individually or with a team, oftentimes they'll talk about the nerves, the angst, the uneasiness that they feel, whether it's pre a game, pre-event, or during, or sometimes even after as well. So today we just want to answer some of those questions, really hone in on what is performance anxiety, what does it look like, and then also, here maybe some strategies that we can throw out there that might be helpful to help any one of you really overcome that. So first things first, what is performance anxiety? What does it look like? What all is in that? Typically, we see whenever someone is talking through it, we might see increased heart rate, really rapid thinking. Sometimes people's palms will get really sweaty, and they're overthinking a lot of times, and sometimes even too with that, you'll have a lot of tension, a lot of timidness. Oftentimes, the way that our minds really work is that we are constantly looking for the things, observing what's going on around us, right? And we can typically, pass by the small things that are good, but we a lot of times will sink our teeth into something that may seem threatening or that may seem like a concern. So that's why it's easy to get caught up in a list of worries. What are the things I need to get done today? What bad things could happen? What are all the things I should be concerned about when it comes to a game, right? And so we get caught up in those, and by sinking our teeth into them, right? It's not always that the situation is. Sometimes it is a challenging situation to be in and should cause a little bit of nerves, but it's also how we perceive the situation. So a lot of times when it's an important game, or it's first game back after an injury, or it's just purely I have this desire, this want to play well, then all of a sudden that threat of what could go wrong, our sensitivity to it rises. I'll tell you this, anytime I have an athlete come in and they say, I'm worried, I've got a little bit of anxiety, I'm, nervous, like that is not a bad thing, first and foremost, right? As long as it's manageable. And then when it's not, we find a way to cope with it too. So that's kind of what it looks like. First and foremost, it's really just about there are normal levels of anxiety, especially when it comes to an event or a competition or a game that we're really excited about. And sometimes excitement, in ways, the way that our body responds, can and oftentimes imitate a little bit of that uneasy, like queasy feeling that we have in our stomach, the butterfly feeling, the just tension, the worries, the nerves, right? So sometimes it's not always just I'm extremely anxious, but it can build to that. And when we feed that, it continues to build, almost like I use a lot with my clients, a snowball that's going downhill. It just builds and builds and builds and gets bigger if we continue to allow it to and continue to feed it.
Mm-hmm. Is it strictly caused by the actual sport, or is it caused by other things sometimes?
Yeah, so I would say a combination of both. It's definitely caused by what's happening in the sport, right? Mm-hmm. So what I want to do on the field, what I want to do on the court, what I want to do in this game, in this event, right? Mm-hmm. But it can also be caused by outside influences, right? It's really hard to compartmentalize any piece of your game. It's almost like an overlapping piece of each one of them, right? So yeah. It can be influenced, right, by parents being there, right, and an undue amount of pressure by the desire to impress a coach, right, by the fact that, okay, these specific coaches are here and we're dealing with recruiting, just simply by the fact that there's a large crowd. So those nerves, that anxiety that comes with performance can often be heightened because of all those things, right?
Mhm.
So a lot of times it is the outside, but then it can also be the internal piece of it, the expectations that we have for ourselves, right?
Yeah.
The expectation of, I should be able to play well because I've been working for how many years, or I have to absolutely play well. Those two words, while we use them a lot in our vocabulary, they can be very dangerous. So the internal expectations of, I have to be at this level, can be extremely dangerous. I'm not saying that we shouldn't have high standards for ourselves, because we need them. I want to be at the standard continuously, right? But adding that extra pressure, that extra expectation of, I have to be here 24/7, can sometimes become overwhelming. So a lot of, when we're dealing with performance anxiety, there's so many perceived pressures that are going on top of the actual real ones that are there, because pressure happens in sports, right? And then we internalize those and we start to focus on the wrong things. A lot of times when I'm walking through something like that with an athlete, because it looks a little different, sometimes I'll draw something out. So I'll draw a couple circles, right? And I'll draw it here for you guys to be able to see. So I'll draw a couple circles and we'll talk about what are the things that really overwhelm you. The I have to play well, I need to play well, the wanting to impress coach, wanting to not make a mistake because of how coach might respond to that mistake. So all of those things, what we'll typically do is we'll just draw a bunch of circles and I'll label them, right? We'll put one of those in each of them, whatever is their biggest stressors, their main four. And then I'll draw a little circle in the middle and show, okay, so we've got all of that stuff going on, and then right here and now, this is you. So we have the have to play well, right? The increased expectations, okay? We've got the haves, the shoulds, okay? We've got the what's coach gonna think, and then sometimes it's too, what are our parents gonna think, right? And then there's you right there in the middle. And we put so much emphasis and focus on all of these things. Number one, which people hear this all the time, it's so far out of your control, it's not even funny.
Yeah.
Can I ask you to not want to play well? No. If you're any type of competitive athlete, you're going to want to play well, right? Can I ask your coach to calm down some? Okay, sure, maybe, but your coach also has to push you, has to drive you. They have to motivate you. Can I ask your parents not to come around? Sure. We could try that, but they're there. They're probably not going to not leave, right? But they're there to support you. They're there to, push you forward, right? And so, and the pressure that you feel when they're around, we can't always get rid of that. And then the I need to be better than what I am, that expectation piece of it, while we can manage that a little bit, it doesn't really fully go away. So what I'll ask an athlete is, these four things, are they really going to ever go away, especially overnight? I'll tell you this, the majority of them are like, no, absolutely not.
Yeah.
So then what I ask them to do is it possible to shift our focus to where we're maybe making those less of a priority and making ourself, our processes, our training, our confidence, all of those things more of a priority? And it's a simple shift, right? So instead, and I'll draw this for you guys, and my handwriting is horrible, but instead, here we go. Instead, we shift to a point at which, maybe we're not, these things aren't going away. We're just making them a little smaller. We're putting more of a focus on the things that we do have control over. We're putting more investment, time, energy into, what do I need to do to prepare my best, right? What do I need to do to handle that anxiety, those nerves? What do I need to do to give myself a chance to have success? And if we can focus on those things, and my focus is here where I have more control, then maybe these over time one, start to become smaller and eventually go away. I've had players who, get to the point where a college coach being around, because they're exposed to it and because they know how to deal with it, now all of a sudden isn't as big of a concern, right? It's something that is kind of in the background noise versus blaring right up front. So all we're really asking is, can we turn the volume down on the things that are inhibiting us, that are causing this anxious feeling, this performance anxiety? Can we turn the volume up on the things that are really going to help us proceed? So in answering your question, absolutely it comes, the performance anxiety piece of it, any of that anxious feelings, they come from what's happening in the sport, yes, but they 100% can be influenced from everything that's going on around us. And that's just within that day, right? That's not even accounting for what's been going on the weeks leading up to it. That's not even accounting for, have I been getting sleep? Have I been, struggling with something from on a personal level? So many factors go into this feeling of something's off. I don't feel right. I'm anxious about what I'm doing.
How can you use what you just showed us in a pregame, someone having pregame anxiety?
Yeah, absolutely. We see the majority of where we see a lot of the anxiety is in preparing for an event, a game, a presentation, whatever realm we're working in, right? Because it's this build up to something big. And in a build up, because you don't have as much control over all the little things that are happening, you build up more often than not the worst case scenarios, right? I'm a fan of being aware of worst case scenarios.
Yeah.
However, you're typically not prepared for them. So instead we focus on the things that we're not prepared for. What are the worst possible things that could happen? And then we highlight those and they get bigger and bigger and bigger, right? So when we're talking pre-game, there's actually a baseball player that I worked with who was having trouble prior to a tournament, prior to a game, sleeping the night before. He'd be fine going to sleep, but sometime throughout the middle of the night might wake up, have really, really anxious thoughts, get a little sweaty, have trouble really going back to sleep, and just calming down, and then in the morning it would he'd wake up and he'd be okay for a little bit, and then it would start to get worse and worse and worse and build until he started playing. And then most players, I'll tell you, most athletes say, started playing, I was fine. Like I was good. I don't even know what happened. Like it just happened, right? But for him, a couple of things we worked on and what I've seen work really well, breathing always is for the majority of people, focusing on your breathing, taking very deep breaths, the exhale piece of it, really being longer than the inhale, can help relax your body, right? Oftentimes when we're dealing with performance anxiety, it's not just about, it's a mind-body relationship, right? So some people will say, okay, I can't be thinking these things. I can't be thinking these things. I can't be thinking these things, but they can't get any control over their thoughts, because do we really ever have full control over our thoughts?
Yeah.
So instead of just focusing on, let me slow down these thoughts, let me get rid of them, why don't we instead do something to slow down our body and give our thoughts a chance to kind of slow down, to kind of follow suit, right? So that's why breathing can help. If I'm taking a deep breath, I'm here and now, I'm focused on my body, right? At least for those 5 to 10 seconds, if I'm counting and then exhaling, I'm not focusing anywhere else. My head is not in the future on what the heck is going to happen tomorrow, what the heck is going to happen today, what are all the worst things that could happen. My head is also not in the past, because that can cause a lot of anxiety. Last game I was horrible. I haven't been doing what I need to. I've really been struggling. Coach has been saying this. Instead of fighting in one of those two realms, we're right here and now in the present moment when we focus on breathing, when we focus on our body. So it's not just about breathing. We also, with this specific athlete, we talked about it's progressive muscle relaxation, but it's basically tensing and relaxing certain parts of your body. Rather than the night before, we had him go through a full body one where it's a little bit longer. I mean, you're spending maybe 10 minutes to try to get your body to a very relaxed state. But morning of, I would never suggest that for an athlete, because we don't want to be to that extent of relaxed, right?
Yeah.
So instead we do a simple, like small version of that, right? Where we're pulling our shoulders up to our shoulders up to our ears and we're tensing, paying attention to what it feels like, relaxing, paying attention to what it feels like, balling our hands up into a fist, paying attention to what that feels like, relaxing, paying attention to what that feels like. And it's all it does. I'm not expecting you to go from a 10 on anxiety all the way down to a 1. But what I am asking is that can we drop it down a little bit, right? To where we have a better opportunity to maybe slow down those thoughts, those rapid thoughts, so that we can get a little bit better sense of control, right? Mm-hmm. And again, going back to that drawing I did earlier, we're not focused on everything else. We're focused on me right here now, what I have control over, right? So we worked on a couple of those things. And then I always tell athletes, look, the best way to get to lose a little bit of that tension, a little bit of that angst, do something physical, not extreme, do something light. But if we're talking pregame, up the intensity of your warm-ups so that we can start to get a little bit more loose and focus and use our minds to be preoccupied on something else, right? Rather than just the, what's going to happen? Oh no, like I've got to do this. Can't let this happen, that kind of thing. So those are a couple of the things that we worked through. And then, really just trying to get him slightly more calm from a physical standpoint, give him something to focus on that was a little bit more simple. And quite frankly, the biggest piece of it was you've got all this stuff going on. We still have to accept the fact that they're there. And in this, I'm not expecting any of that to go away, except it's there. Let's find a way to put our energy towards something else.
How do you deal with during the game anxiety?
During the game. So usually what that looks like, it's going to be someone who's a little bit more timid, afraid to make mistakes, right? Might not, if we're playing a sport with a ball, might not want the ball, or might be hiding, hanging back, right? Usually that's happening because the way the anxiety works, even if we're moving, our thoughts are still extremely rapid, right? Mm-hmm. So we're overthinking every single decision that we make. And it's causing us to be indecisive, and it's causing us to not make a decision or hang back so that we don't even have to be involved in whatever play is happening, right? For most people, what I tell them is prepare before you ever get on the field or the court, right? If you know that that's going to happen continuously and that it's happened to you before, well, those few minutes that were, whether it's pregame if you're starting, or whether it's you're on the bench and there might be a potential to go in, start paying attention to things. Start settling your body down a little bit. Be ready when you enter the game, because if you are, it's a lot easier to zone in on a focus, right? And then I always tell players also to have, if we're like a first 5 mentality. So those first 5 minutes that we're playing, whether it's start of the game or when we go in, I just want you to, one, we're not trying to do the most. We're not trying to do everything. We're trying to keep it simple, focus on a couple things to build off of, right? So that then we can start to get comfortable. A lot of anxiety is about, I don't expect you to be comfortable all the time. There has to be a level of discomfort, but you do have to be able to find some type of comfortability in the situation that you're in so that you feel like you have control over it. So I tell them that. I'll also have them pick one thing. So basketball, for example, pick one thing that we're trying to focus on defense. Quick hands, move your hands, being fast, moving your feet, getting low. Give me one thing. And that's all I want you to focus on for those first few minutes. And if we can do that well, and that pumps you up, and that gets you loose, and that gets you comfortable, right? Mm-hmm. Then maybe that anxiety starts to drop a little bit, right? But we're still going to deal with even in game, we're still going to deal with the rapid thoughts, the overthinking, right? So it's a process. Once you have the right thing to focus on and we settle ourselves down physically just a little bit, still got to be on edge if we're playing, right? I'm not expecting you to be like you're going to sleep when you're playing. But once you have the right thing to focus on, you can settle your body down a little bit, and then you start to see success. That success starts to build, and we get more comfortable in the game. Some people just aren't comfortable the first 5 to 10 to 15 minutes, and that's okay. But we can do things to make you more comfortable faster in warm-ups, before you go out on the field or on the court or wherever you are. And then, while you're out there, trying to have strategies. This is what I'm focused on. This is what I'm trying to accomplish. And then when I accomplish them, it starts to build.
And what would you say to someone dealing with post-game anxiety or stressors, having to go home with parents that they don't are stressed about, stuff like that?
Yeah, so when we're talking pure performance anxiety, we see the majority of it pre and during. But what we do see after a game or after an event or after a competition is either anxiety about what just happened, like perception of bad performance, like just was not good, and what implications that has. Maybe a parent's going to get mad at me. The car ride home is going to be miserable, right? Coach is going to do this. What's going to happen? And that's where we switch. Notice we're back in the past, right? What just happened? To we switch all the way to how is this going to affect me in the future? Well, I'm going to have a bad game next time. I can't have a bad game next time. This can't happen again. What is coach going to say? How is this going to impact my playing time, right? So we're doing, again, that jump from what just happened past to I'm going all the way to the future. And there's no sense of, after a game, you are very subjective. Okay, you're very caught in what just happened. It's not, is it an accurate reflection? In some ways, yes, because it's very fresh, right? But is it an objective evaluation? In a lot of ways, no, right? So what I tell the athletes I work with is, first off, get out if you're frustrated or if you're anxious or if you're worried, or would love to tell, parents not to talk about it a lot right after the game, especially if it was a bad one. But even more so if it was a good one, it's a, blanket statement, blanket commitment, like enjoyed watching you. However, some of those things are going to happen. So getting that out is really important. And then, evaluating it, taking some time. With a lot of the athletes I work with, if it was a big event, if it was something that they really cared about, take a breather. I mean, maybe it's going to be a few hours, maybe it's going to be the following morning, sleep on it, maybe it's going to be a couple days if it was end of season, conference type stuff, and take a breather. And then we go back to having a good evaluation where we're focused on what are the things that actually worked, what are the things that we needed to improve on, and then how can we do that moving forward. And so that really structure, we can still, if we get angry, if we have those nerves, we can still do the things I was talking about before with our body, with our thoughts, right? But having a process for how your post game, having a plan for your pre-game, then having a process for your post game, it gives us a sense of control. You don't have to do it perfectly. It's not a B, C, D, E, F, G, right? It's these are the things that need to happen in pregame. These are the things that need to happen postgame. And now I just make sure that they happen. I check them off the list, right? It gives us a little bit more sense of control. And going back to the, it's caused by game just sucked, or, and what are the implications for my future, right? Those two, when I say that out loud, I have zero control over that. I'm going to sit in the miserable piece of it, and then that miserable piece feeling is going to cause me to have worries, more worries on top of concerns, right? So we have to be proactive about that, right? So the piece of like letting it out and then evaluating it a little bit gives us that opportunity to say to combat the worry of that just sucked, right? Sure, it probably did suck. If it was bad, it. Okay. But there were probably some decent things that happened in there. And let's at least look at it from a realistic point of view, right? Did the things that we were trying to work on, did we at least get those done, even if nothing else happened, right? And then how can I improve? What can I do moving forward? Well, that takes care of the uncontrollable piece of what are the implications of this. I could list out right now a long list of worries. Probably not going to do me any good unless I actually have a plan to overcome them, right? And improve from them and move forward with them. So that's really, when it comes to post game, I get the worry, especially for the car ride home for younger athletes, the concerns, their implications of playing poorly. That's realistic. Their implications of playing poorly. And if you consistently play poorly, even bigger consequences of that. But if you focus on that, we're putting all of our energy in the wrong things. Be real about it, be realistic, understand it. And then now, what are we going to do about it? What can we do about it?
What can you do as a coach if you notice one of your players has performance anxiety? What would be the best advice?
For coaches, so a couple ideas in helping their players work through that. One, how you structure your warm-ups determines and can have a huge influence on how a player enters a game, right? The older they get, the more they figure out what they need. But especially at a younger level and even at a high school level, they don't always realize that, right? And I've actually been there. There was a team that I worked with this last fall, and I was watching several of their games, and the games where they would start slow and be questionable versus the games where they were secure and they won and they did extremely well, there was a difference in their warm-up, right? The level of intensity of it. Now, I'm not saying you're intense, from the get-go, right? Ease into it, more like small-sided little things that we're doing, right? And then amp up the intensity where it's a little more outcome focused, especially the last 5 to 10 minutes before you stop your warm-ups, so that we're leaving them with the thought in mind of I'm loose, I'm comfortable. Again, mind-body connection when it comes to performance anxiety. If we can't get the mind to slow down, let's at least start with the body and then allow the mind to follow suit. So a little bit more of an intense warm-up, give them a job. For a coach, give them something specific to focus on, whether it's what you need out of them that game, or it's just simply, this is what I want you, this is what I need from you this day. This is what I need from you this practice, right? Because some people have performance anxiety when it comes to practice too. So if they give them if a coach knows that this person is more likely to overthink, to get distracted, to get kind of mentally in that grind, give them one job. And I don't even care if it's a job on the field or on the court. Give them a job for during warm-ups, right? One thing that they can focus on, whether it's what they need to do or what you need out of them physically that game. You give them a simple job, and now they can put their effort, that angst, that feeling into that, right? The nerves into that, because a lot of people, when they're nervous, there's more hyped up. I've got more to give, and I don't know where it's going, but it's going to all the wrong things.
Mm-hmm.
So that's another suggestion. And then, help them in that evaluation piece of it too. Maybe not right after the game, right?
Yeah.
But help them in understanding, like in accurately understanding, whether it's through film, whether it's through a conversation, whether it's in the next practice, but accurately understanding, hey, these are the things I needed out of you. This is what you did. It was great. These are the things I need you to improve on, so that you're kind of setting the tone for how they evaluate. Because what I've noticed is a lot of our athletes in this generation really look to others for evaluation because they need it. They need that feedback quickly, right? So if they're going to look to you for it, help teach them the right structure in order to judge what they just did. Because a lot of the performance anxiety comes from perception of what could happen, perception of what is happening, and perception of what just did happen. So if we can accurately help them get to the point where they're assessing it, judging it from I'm not saying you did amazing when you did it, right? But from a realistic standpoint and an action-oriented, what can I do about this?
Mm-hmm.
We're in a good spot for that.
Wow.
Fantastic.
Oh, yeah.
Well, perfect. Thank you guys so much for hopping on. Like I said, we were just talking through performance anxiety because, quite frankly, a lot of the athletes that I see are dealing with it on some level. My firm belief is that to some extent, we can manage it, right? And then there are also coping skills to be able to deal with it. But having performance anxiety, having nerves, not a bad thing. It is actually extremely normal. It's extremely normal to have doubt. And the best way to do it is if it becomes overwhelming, what are some ways that we can kind of adjust to make sure that we're managing it well. So thank you so much for hopping on. Really appreciate it. So we're trying to go live every Wednesday and have some new topics to talk to you guys about. So please feel free, if you've got anything, any questions, any ideas, throw them at me. Would love to hear them. Thanks so much.